Okay, Barb, we're live.
Welcome everyone to ARMA Canada's Sagesse Live, the virtual event. I hope today finds you healthy and safe wherever you are. My name is Bellamy and I'm your MC for today and the incoming Sagesse Canadian Content Director. At ARMA Canada, we know that connecting and communicating with our information management and information governance community is more important now than ever before. The COVID-19 pandemic is affecting everyone. It affects the way we work as well as the way we learn. We're eager to continue that connection with you while adapting to new ways of engagement. Today's live event is just one example of how ARMA Canada is evolving. Changes are coming, so keep an eye on Twitter, LinkedIn, or your inbox. Also, don't forget to check the ARMA Canada website at www.armacanada.org. We start today's webinar with Sagesse. What is it? How is it managed? Then we proceed into two articles that recently appeared Volume 5, 2020 Winter Edition of Sagesse, the Journal of Canadian Records and Information Management. Our first presentation features Christy Walters and Crystal Walters sharing the transformational impacts of big data and analytics, followed by an answer period. The second presentation features Lori Ashley from Preservica, who will discuss how to integrate digital preservation into your information governance program. Again, followed by a question and answer period. We'll wrap up today's Sagesse Live with a message from our ARMA Canada Region Director, Christy Walters, and if time permits, she will be taking questions. Also with us is Adrienne Morrison, or Bobbie, ARMA Canada's Program Coordinator. I'll turn this over to her with help with some of the more technical aspects of this event, including the question and answer sessions after.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sagesse webinar. Thank you, Bob. I'm Bobbie Morrison, and I'm just here to give you some tech tips for today's session. So if you're able to see and hear us right now, congratulations, you're accessing the live stream through our EventMobi platform. If you're having issues with the live stream at any point, please reach out to conference@armacanada.org and we will try to help you out. We encourage you to register and create an account in EventMobi. All you have to do is click on the little login button to the top right of your screen, and it will prompt you to create an account. After each speaker today, we're going to have an opportunity for you guys to ask some questions. So it'll be about 5 minutes. You're going to want to type your questions into the Q&A box on the right-hand side, just to the right of the live stream video. And again, we're only going to have time for about 5 minutes, so we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can. A couple of other quick EventMobi housekeeping items. You'll notice a session feedback link at the bottom of your screen. We definitely encourage you to get to complete that survey and give us a little bit of feedback on today's webinar and our virtual event, so we can continue to bring you great content outside the box, inside the home. Our speaker slide decks today are available on the EventMobi page, and that's also where you'll find the contact information for your speakers as well, and you may download those. And if you're on Twitter, don't forget to tweet this event. It's #ARMACAN. And lastly, we will be recording our session today, and you as registered participants will receive a link to that webinar recording. So I'm going to turn us back over to our MC, Barb, to tell us a little bit more about Sagesse and introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Bobbie. We are going to start with the next piece, which is, what is Sagesse? And it's going to take me a second for my slides to catch up. Slowly but surely. Sagesse, the Journal of Canadian Records and Information Management. The title of the word Sagesse came from a French word meaning wisdom, good sense, foresight, and sagacity. The Sagesse Journal is assembled by an editorial committee, and this committee embodies the meaning of Sagesse. The team is made up of 6 dedicated information management professionals that have experience in most industries, private and public organizations, in education for both formal and in informal settings, as well as consulting. The committee selects the themes for each year. They write articles for Sagesse. They look for authors and encourage new authors and returning authors. They conduct reviews of the content before publishing, and so much more. Our committee consists of the following in alphabetical order: Christine Adrienne, Sandy Bradley, Pat Burns, Sandra Duncan, Yuda Fox, and Stuart Rennie. Yuda Fox is the current Canadian Content Director, and I'm happy to say that as she passes the role over to me in July, she's going to be staying on for another year to continue mentoring me so I can keep this publication strong and full of excellent information. They've all made a significant contribution to ARMA as well as the profession. We're truly lucky to have fellows of ARMA International on our committee. And 4 of the 6 are actually part of our editorial committee, and they are fantastic. If you're interested in being part of the Sagesse editorial committee, send us an email at sagesse@armacanada.org. Sagesse is an ARMA Canada publication, and it's filled mostly with Canadian content regarding records and information management, as well as information governance. Articles can be practical in nature, case studies, lessons learned, theoretical, current research, or even just challenging the status quo. And as you know, today is anything but status quo. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we work, how we share and secure information, and so much more. One example is how the coronavirus pandemic has created the need to use big data to track the spread of the pathogen, plan disease control, as well as prevention efforts. Companies and governments are tracking the location data of millions of mobile phone users for clues about how the virus spreads and whether the social distancing measures put in place are working. Unlike a private investigator who uses surveillance to track the movements of a particular individual, these efforts analyze large data sets to uncover patterns in people's movements and behaviors over the course of the pandemic. A couple of weeks ago on the CTV News, there was a report that showcased the data of all of the citizens of Calgary and their mobile phones. It stated that most people were staying within a 2-kilometer radius in order to help flatten that curve. But this is all being done without our knowledge. So does that, cause any problems for us in the future? And guess what? This leads to our first presentation. The transformational impacts of big data and analysis. The presenters and authors are Christy Walters and Crystal Walters. Christy is a CIP and has over 10 years of progressive experience providing information management advisory and consulting services in several industries. She has a range of consulting experience working with provincial and federal governments, in the private sector with Deloitte and PwC, and presently in the university setting, while also completing her MBA part-time. Christy is also the current regional director of the ARMA Canada region, and she's one busy lady. Crystal is a programmer consultant with many years of experience in data management and electronic information management in the public sector, manufacturing industry, and in higher education. She is focused on strategic ways to manage and analyze data and information for relationship management and philanthropic success. She holds a post-diploma in information management. She holds a BA and is also a business graduate student at Memorial University. So without further ado, our next presentation is the transformational impact of big data and analytics. Take it away, ladies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Christy Walters. I'm the Canadian Region Director of ARMA Canada, and I'm so excited to welcome you to today's virtual Sagesse live event. This would not be possible without the hard work and dedication of our Canadian Content Director, Uda Fox, incoming Canadian Content Director, Barbara Bellamy, and the entire Sagesse editorial committee. I also want to send a huge thank you to our marketing team, Jay Jorgensen of Trevor Banks, as well as our conference team, Shelley Smith, Ellie Kim, Adrienne, Bobbie, Morrison, and Robin Bigger, for putting this event together and connecting us coast to coast for this live webinar. The transformational impacts of big data and analytics. This is an article that I wrote together with my sister Crystal, and I'm not sure if you've heard, but we have been known as the I Am Twins in some circles. We absolutely love information management and are passionate in particular about where it's going, and especially in this age of big data and analytics. So we've had lots of in-depth conversations together, much to the dismay of our significant others, on the topic, our backgrounds. So I have a background in traditional information and digital records management and getting more into information protection and security, whereas Crystal's more on the programming side of things. So she has some background in SAS programming and Python. So together we put this article together for the 2020 edition of Sagesse. Just a quick outline of the presentation. We're going to take you through some major topics that are presented in the article, including big data evolution, organizational and societal impacts of data, decision-making and trust, disruptive impacts of big data, some challenges inherent in big data, and also the transformational impacts of big data, and how information management professionals can really create value in this age of big data. There's tremendous opportunity, and we want this presentation to be very practical for you and give you an idea of the types of skills we feel information management professionals can learn in order to add value to their organizations in the big data age. Big data is possibly the most significant tech disruption in business and academic ecosystems since the meteoric rise of the internet and the digital economy. And that could not be more true. Data is absolutely everywhere. Big data technologies are everywhere. Machine learning, AI, Internet of Things. They're such buzzwords, but they're here and it's exciting, the capabilities. But there's also challenges involved in that scale of data. So what is big data? Gardner defines it as high volume, high velocity, or high variety information assets that require new forms of processing to enable enhanced decision-making, insight discovery, and process optimization. A quick crash course in data, because I always find it a bit challenging to wrap my head around the exact scale of big data. So that graphic there on the right gives you an idea of the breakdown in terms of the scale of big data, all the way from bits and bytes to yottabytes. And yes, that is 24 zeros. The way we like to think about it is called the rice analogy. And that is, you think of 1 grain of rice as a byte and a kilobyte, which is sort of like the early computing days or the olden days, and then moving into megabytes and gigabytes of modern day computers. And then you move more into the terabytes. Rice can cover Nova Scotia. That's sort of the internet world of data. And then you're getting into exabytes and zettabytes with this big data world. A lot of the social tools are already in that category, and the zettabytes can fill the entire Pacific with rice. The largest one we have there is the yottabyte, and that is an Earth-sized rice ball. So where's all this data coming from? Obviously, billions of people are creating data every second of every day, and a large area where a lot of this is coming from is the socials, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. They're topping the list right now. They have 1 billion plus users per day, every day on these social tools. Astronomical. A day in data. So I really like this graphic by Rick and Chur, and we will send out the slides so you can click on some of the links. So a quick view of day in data. To simplify, 500 million tweets, 294 billion emails sent, 65 billion messages sent on WhatsApp, 5 million searches made. And by 2025, it's estimated that 463 exabytes of data will be created globally each day. Another good way to look at the big data evolution, we're sitting here right now at 47 zettabytes, and it's projected by Statistica that we're going to be up to 2,142 zettabytes of data in 10 years. Another fun graph that we found and really like is by Lori Lewis, and it's showing you quickly there exactly what happens in an internet minute in 2020. Getting more into the crux of our article, in terms of characteristics of big data, there are 5 key characteristics, including volume, velocity, variety, veracity, and now value. And value wasn't always a part of that, but in recent years, value has been added to the now 5 Vs, since big data is so valuable. And that infographic there on the right is from IBM. It's a fantastic view into how you can extract business value from the now 5 Vs of big data. Big data technologies. We've all heard of Hadoop, Splunk. This image shows you the 4 different fields you can categorize big data into. So you have storage big data technologies, analytics, mining, and even visualization. And it's not included here, but programming technology is a big part of this. And as I mentioned, Crystal does do SAS programming, and that is a big data analytic technology as well. Organizational impact. So again, we're getting back to our article. We saw that there were key benefits in terms of enhanced decision-making. Data and analytics in particular, there are 4 main types. You have descriptive and diagnostic, and that's the older data analytic tools. But now we're moving more into predictive and prescriptive analytics. And what's amazing about that is that it's not just about what's happening in your business or why it's happening, but what's likely to happen and what your organization needs to do. So it's really enabling organizations to be proactive in decision-making, which equates to dollars and provides tremendous value to organizations. We looked at the societal impacts of big data, and we're seeing more and more there are challenges in manipulating data for experimentation. There have been some controversies, and we focused on one in particular from 2014, wherein Facebook and OkCupid were questioned for experimenting on unaware users by adjusting the content that was presented to them. And this is continuing, obviously, unto today. I guess the key question coming out of this is whether such experimentation is really beneficial to society at large and what moral scrutiny is appropriate in this situation. Decision-making and trust. So trust really is the next big data opportunity. And the concept of trust is key because even if the data itself is of the highest quality, an organization is going to fail to enhance decision-making if the firm's leaders don't trust the data. In terms of trust, as you can see, artificial intelligence cannot distinguish between a muffin and a chihuahua. So image recognition technologies are not at the point now where they can actually discern between animals and pastries. And that is an example of distrusting your data. And I mean, I have a little Maltese. I haven't run him through this, but I'd be pretty disappointed if his cute little face was confused for a muffin. Disruptive impacts. We're seeing dramatic shifts happening across professions. There's definitely a need to retrain employees in the age of big data, since there's a training gap, and to develop new employee skill sets, particularly in terms of information management practitioners. We'll focus on this a little more later. With that, I would like to hand you off to my lovely sister, Crystal, to talk through some more of the challenges and opportunities in the big data age.
Hi, I'm Crystal, and I'll be taking us through some big data challenges. One big challenge is dark data. This graphic from Factor Daily shows traditional enterprise data, the big data, and then the dark data, which comprises about 65% of the potential data for use in organizations. Dark data is the unmanaged enterprise content that lurks in the shadows. This graphic shows there exists a great opportunity for information managers to help manage this cluttered reserve of data, potentially holding valuable insights into your business. An example of where dark data might be found is in the file shares. Information managers can take the lead in managing this type of information, which in turn improves the data quality in the organization. Data quality is really key in terms of generating trust in the data and valuable insights using data analytics techniques. Another challenge with big data is the cloud. This graph shows the graduation from enterprise data all the way up to cloud storage options currently expected to become even more dominant. The main public cloud service providers include Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, and Google, who are continuing to enhance their cloud-based services. Today's organization is likely to use a hybrid storage structure, incorporating some of these public cloud providers and others. When adding a cloud service provider, it's essential to conduct a thorough cloud assessment. The assessment should involve legal and privacy experts in reviewing the verbiage of any contracts before they are signed to ensure obligations between the organization and the cloud service providers are defined in these respects. To give an example, my organization is currently transitioning from a 25-year-old relational database system to a cloud-based fundraising software. An essential part of the signing off of this contract was conducting a cloud assessment. It's similar to a vulnerability assessment or a threat risk assessment, and this assessment is key to helping ensure the data is protected and preserved for future use. A big challenge with the cloud is educating yourself on the minutiae of these contracts being signed with cloud service providers. Cybersecurity is another challenge. With more stored information comes greater risk for unauthorized access. Information is incredibly valuable as an organizational commodity, and cyber attackers are becoming more and more sophisticated in their approaches. Some types of attacks include phishing and data breaches through computer-embedded IoT devices, which includes everything from your car to alarm clocks and voice assistants. However, the single biggest vulnerability in an organization is its people. It is important to work with security teams to ensure organizational data is managed and protected, and to train staff in following proper data handling procedures and in recognizing cyber attacks. Privacy is a huge challenge in and of itself. Adding big data to that equation, it becomes even more complex. In today's response to COVID-19, there is a collection of data and mobile location tracking for coronavirus and coronavirus testing. This data collection is introducing new challenges in Europe, particularly with the European General Data Protection Regulation. There are stringent rules in place, and the challenge is how to balance protecting privacy with this need to collect data for coronavirus. The transformational impacts of big data will be massive. Big data is not about the amount of data available, but rather the value that can be gleaned. This is where information managers are perfectly positioned. An organization's information governance strategy is critical because underneath it falls data management, security and privacy, and others that flow to it. As such, information management governance is critical. This image from IBM Redbook's book, Information Governance Principles and Practices for a Big Data Landscape, illustrates how information governance supports big data. The graphic to the right shows how an organization must sustain a good balance between ensuring that data is fit for purpose and having a good production tempo. Big data requires quick decisions at a quick tempo. For the quality piece of it, information managers work on governing data quality, mapping information, managing meaning, and managing classifications. These are all areas where we have expertise. These areas also include metadata management, data integration and quality, security and privacy, and master data management. These are just some examples of where information governance should be at that top tier. Sound information management practices can provide tremendous value to organizations, and information managers should be at the table for these data conversations. When writing the article, we thought about opportunities in terms of information management practitioners and skills that should be capitalized on in order to provide value and actionable intelligence. In big data technologies, things like data security become key. Data privacy as discussed, and data quality. It is important to generate trust in the data at all levels. Cybersecurity is crucial, and working with security teams on cloud storage, as well as protecting information from unauthorized access and use. Data management and also, of course, risk management, because with more data comes more risks. For this reason, information management practitioners will need to work closer with privacy, with IT, with security, with legal. They will need to interject themselves into those projects and those teams, showing how they can provide such tremendous value to the big data equation. To create value, all data needs to be categorized, stored, and protected. There's a lot of free resources on the internet. There is the Sagesse journal, which has valuable content this year on information law, big data, and on digital preservation. Forbes has a list of 9 free courses listed on this slide. The profession of information management is perfectly positioned to drive big data towards actionable intelligence and provide value. It is important to prioritize the types of skills and knowledge that can help your organization navigate this big data era. Here's some of our information, our contact on LinkedIn and our emails if you're interested. And please send along any questions you have. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope this information was valuable to you and that you found it practical. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Christy and Crystal. That was an excellent presentation. We're going to have some time for some questions now, and I'm looking at some of the questions you guys have submitted to the EventMobi feed, so I will ask those questions to our speakers. So first question, how do you manage the need for big data and the desire to keep everything and balance it with maintaining records and information management principles? I think that's for both of you.
I'd like to start off. Thank you so much for that question. And the great news here is data is not information. And so if you look at that hierarchy, you have data at the bottom flowing up into information, and then knowledge, and then wisdom at the top. So in terms of data, we can have a lot of data, but it's really extracting the value out of that data that makes it worthwhile for organizations. And I do think we as information management professionals are perfectly positioned to extract value from our organizations from that data. I mean, we're sitting on a gold mine, frankly, and spoiler alert, I think we're the people that are going to be the ones to unlock the key to that data for organizations and ultimately unlock the value out of the information. So the good news is information is different than data, but I think information management principles can definitely be applied to the management of data.
Yeah, to chime in there, for sure, I think information practitioners are hugely valuable in this regard. I think data quality, like in programming in any analytical tool, it's all about the quality piece. So we still need to keep that record from the inset. We need to keep it managed properly in order to really drive the big data analytic insights, really. It's everything. It's a big part of the equation.
Thank you. All right, so next question. Where do you see the most value from using big data analytics?
Well, we did a ton of research looking at this article and creating this article. And I have to say the key value proposition that we found was improved decision-making all the way, and specifically enabling proactive decision-making in your organizations. If you want to make good decisions, you need to really have that information at your fingertips, and big data can really help you mine your data and bring that information to your fingertips for quick decisions that ultimately save you time. And as we all know, time is money in this day and age, and avoiding bad decisions and anticipating risks before they happen is another key metric, but I think decision making is really the one that came out on top for us.
Yeah, totally. Like, it's all about data-driven decisions. That's the buzzword we hear in business today, is data-driven decisions. And an organization, if they're not really unlocking those potential insights from their data, then they're missing it on a huge competitive advantage segment, really. So yeah, that's it, Christy. So I agree.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So your article mentions various technologies for harnessing big data. Have you used any of those in your own research?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, my experience with big data started in my education at Memorial University, and I was involved in some social science projects. And this was mentioned in the article briefly, but big data is really bringing social sciences kind of closer to home in terms of the research capabilities that are opening up, the cost reduction for research. And I've also used it in my work. I mean, I do SAS programming, and it uses Hadoop as well to kind of leverage the insights in data. And now we know, like, the cloud-based providers are providing that pool of data as well to kind of set you up against your competitors and let you know where you stand, kind of drive business decisions and keep you on track. So I've had quite a bit of experience with it, I would say.
And to tag team there off of Crystal, so my career started back about 10 years ago now with Deloitte, and they were just starting up the technology consulting practice back at that time. And we were just building our data analytics center here in St. John's. So while it was quite a while ago and the data has changed quite a bit since then, it was a very exciting start to my career in analytics. And then coming from there, I moved to a university setting where I am now. And I've been there for the past 5 years. And as you know, universities are institutions that have tremendous amounts of research data. And I've been really fortunate in my career to work on a few projects. One in particular that I recall is with our medical school. And so we were fortunate to work with the Center for Health Informatics and Analytics at the university with IBM Watson computer that they have there, and to do some work in the background on the naming conventions and on the metadata and backend storage of that computer. So that was really, really exciting. And also too, universities, as you probably are aware, are using a lot of predictive analytics right now. And so we're getting into that on a few projects around the university around admissions and the student life cycle, and how to really just know what best tools we can provide our students and what they need throughout their career, and how we keep retaining our students. So we're using a lot of and investigating a lot of different predictive analytic capabilities on that right now. And as well, the third area I would say is risk management. We collect a lot of data around the university on risk, and we use that for decision making.
Awesome, great.
Thank
So we
you.
have time for one last quick question. How can RIM, well, maybe not quick, but how can RIM professionals ensure they have a seat at the table when it comes to big data?
I'll take this one, Crystal, and I'll let you finish up and conclude here. But I do think, as we said in the presentation, we really need to interject ourselves into this conversation. And I was thinking and reflecting on writing this article with Crystal, and I think what was key was that we come from different professions, and so we talk, and so she's more programming, I'm more IM, but she obviously has a lot of knowledge on IM. And I think that's where the magic happened, at the intersection of things. So, and that's where the magic always happens, right? So I think in getting to talk to her about this, we sort of came up with a lot of insights on the topic. And I think too, it's really just opening yourself up to data professionals, security professionals, IT professionals in your organization. I'm pretty fortunate now. I am located at, and I work alongside ITS, because we do report into the CIO at my office. But for many people, information management is siloed. And I think just reaching out and engaging and realizing it's not scary. Like, we are in the best position possible to manage this information. We're going to unlock that gold mine for you. So I think we should start the conversation now.
Great.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's about claiming your spot at that table, and information managers hold on to all these resources. They have the security, the privacy, all that knowledge, the information protection, and the traditional information management. All of that is extremely valuable to these conversations. And I think it's important to start that conversation, you know, from all the top down, and kind of get your word in, because now is the time to make big changes. Big data is going to literally be massive in the future. I think we're just at the beginning stages. Even though it came out in 2005, Hadoop being kind of like, not out, sorry, Hadoop being invented, we're still only seeing like the very brink of where it could go to leverage like the potential in business.
Great. Well, thank you. And I know we had a couple other questions, but unfortunately we're out of time. However, I would encourage you to contact Christy and Crystal. Their contact information is in their PowerPoint linked on EventMobi. And I'm going to turn us back over to our MC Barb to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Bobbie. And thank you very much, Crystal. And oh, sorry, my bad. I'm having technical difficulties here. Just a sec. I really enjoyed that analogy about rice. It gives me a whole new look on certain things when people start talking hexabyte, petabyte, and now yottabyte. Who knew? Like, it's I think I made it. Did I? Do we know where I'm at right now? Craziness. Me and technology, we don't agree very well some days. Our next presentation is titled Integrate Digital Preservation into Your Information Governance Program. Our presenter and author today is Lori Ashley. Lori is Preservica's Industry Market Development Manager, where she analyzes cross-industry and sector-specific requirements for long-term and permanent records retention and use. Lori is Preservica's liaison to the Council of State Archivists and the National Association of Government Archivists and Records Administrators. She's a longtime member of AIM, SAA, and ARMA. Lori joined Preservica in 2017 after 14 years as an independent management consultant and educator who advised government and commercial organizations on information governance and records management. So, without further ado, integrate digital preservation into your information governance program. Take it away, Lori.
Hi, this is Lori Ashley. I'm happy to join the ARMA Canada presentation. My topic is integrating digital preservation into your information governance program, and I hope that you will find it of interest. A little bit about my background. As Barbara said, I'm the Industry Market Development Manager with Preservica, which is a solution provider, a digital preservation software vendor. Before I joined Preservica 3 years ago, I was a self-employed consultant in records management who found my way into digital preservation and decided to spend the end of my career advocating for digital preservation. So I'm hoping to share my passion with you today. But I do want to explain what digital preservation is all about, give you some use cases so you can understand how different types of organizations are using digital preservation as a program. We're the technology component of it, but of course it takes humans and rules and missions and mandates and all those sorts of things for a program to come into fruition. And then I want to talk a little bit about how I see digital preservation moving into the mainstream of records management and information governance. And hopefully my call to action at the conclusion will convince you that this is something, whether you're near the end of your career like I am, part of your legacy, or if you're earlier in your career, something that you might want to learn more about and gravitate to and hopefully champion. So let's move on and we'll see if I'm successful in my goal. So one question that always comes up when you talk about digital preservation is how long is long term? When should we be concerned? What does it mean? What is the threshold between not long term and long term? And what you're seeing on the slide is a poster that I presented at ARMA Canada in 2015. So you can tell that I've been sort of on this soapbox for a little bit of time. And maybe some of you will remember me. I had some good conversations. It was the only poster I could post a question that year, so I got some good attention. But the question is, how long is long term? It's long enough to be worried about the impacts of changing technology, which we know is happening all around us. And so there's a definition there that it may be indefinite. Long term is certainly if you have permanent records or to the end of the republic or the end of the institution. It could also be based on your technology cycles. And the second definition there comes out of a study that was done by technologists who said, really beyond 10 and 15 years, we begin to lose the capability to do logical and physical migration that keeps those assets authentic. And why, of course, do organizations keep things for more than 10 years? So that 10 years is a marker we use in this domain to say that you probably need to be concerned if something's already gone through a couple of technology refresh cycles. And for those of us in the records management sphere, you can think about your retention schedule and what is listed as being retained for longer than 10 years. And if it's being retained only in digital format, that's the kind of content that falls into this category. The chart that you see is a study that was done by the Information Governance Initiative a number of years ago, asking a spectrum of organizations, why do you keep information for a long time? None of this will be surprising to this audience. Statutory, regulatory, or legal obligations, HR, of course, environmental safety, memory, client documents, depending on what industry or sector you're in. So there's the keep because it has value. We need to use it to inform our decision making, to leverage our intellectual property, to do our job, to produce the widgets, to serve our customers, whatever that is. And then, of course, there's the mitigate risk, keeping evidence in order to ensure that folks understand what was done, what wasn't done, and just keep things rolling along. The problem is that digital content is fragile and constantly at risk. There's a quote here from Cheryl McKinnon, who hopefully all of you know. She's an Ontario-based consultant with Forrester, but of course was in the ECM sphere for a long time. And she's just put out another paper, which is available on Preservica's website. But here's the point, is that this stuff breaks down. The digital stuff is very fragile. It depends on hardware and software that's always changing. It's subject to vendors and proprietary formats and cycles that are driven by things outside your organization. There's loss of budgets and organizational changes, changes in personnel, so that the person who understood how to maintain that application or that legacy system or that collection of content leaves the organization, and so you begin to lose track of what's going on. So all of these things factor into the consideration that long-term records, digital records, need proactive care. So what is digital preservation specifically? It's a part of the broad spectrum of information management, of course. So I cut off the long definition here, but I can offer two of the three. The short definition is it's people, process, technology, policy, strategies, and actions with a focus on ensuring access to digital content over time. And the thing about that phrase is you can't access digital content over time unless you take preservation action. Because if you just leave digital content sitting around and you go to read it in 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 or 100 years, you won't be able to do it because it requires a machine to read. And that's the problem. The longer definition there is to ensure access to reformatted and born digital. So we're talking about digitized content or born digital. And I can tell you there is so much digitization action going on in the world. It's really, really striking. People are wanting to make born or physical assets accessible. And so an example of one of Preservica's customers is the Kentucky Department of Library and Archives. And what they do is things that they have in physical exhibition cases in their state archives, they also have digitized representation so that people who aren't able to make it, and of course now the archives is closed, can't make it physically to the museum or archives, can see those assets online. And so their organizations are expanding their collections of digital content in order to make it easier to access. So it's both digitized and born digital content, and you've got to deal with it regardless of what's going on in the technology environment, and you've got to keep it authentic, which means you need to be sure you've got the right assets and you've figured out down to the bit level the characterization of that asset. So this is the standard that drives what goes on in this industry. It's called ISO 14721, and it's the Open Archival Information System Reference Model. So what it does is it describes functions that need to be in a system. This is the simplest representation of it. It says there's content produced by somebody, there's somebody down the road who would like access to it, and in the middle is an institution or a set of those policies, processes, and strategies that keep it alive. This is what's inside that box of the system, and this is what Preservica's system was built to do, is all these things of taking the content in, keeping it in storage, keeping the metadata associated with it, migrating it into future file formats as required, and then making it accessible, taking it in from whoever and making it accessible in the future. And then this is a representation of the object itself. So we know a record isn't just a record, it's also the metadata associated with it that tells where it came from and what its purpose was. So this is the kind of package of content that comes into a system, a digital preservation system. It's the object, it's information about its technical and descriptive characteristics, its fixity information. And so those packages come into the preservation system, and that's where they live and continue to live going forward. So in the paper I wrote, I offered up a couple of use cases, which you see here. These are all Preservica customers, the Library and Archives Canada, who will be very familiar to you, Associated Press, which is a news organization headquartered in New York that's been around for 170 plus years. And then just over the Canadian border, Niagara Falls is University of Buffalo, New York, and their university archives. So it really is, if you have digital content you need to keep for a long time, you're a candidate for digital preservation technology. The the institutions that have come first to the table and who are using this very actively are the usual suspects: archives, museums, cultural heritage institutions, foundations, intergovernmental organizations like NATO and European Union, and central banks, and all sorts of folks who have been around maybe a long time, but who are designated, who have a mission and mandate. They exist to serve by preserving and providing access to valued content, and that can be content they created. So in the case of a corporate archive or a commercial sector entity, it's content that organization created and they're holding for themselves for corporate memory, and then possibly to make available to research and to fuel innovation in the future. So we have commercial customers that have advertisements and commercials and brand information, and that's useful to them when they institute new campaigns. And then we have a lot of government customers, because I know many of you in the audience are in the public sector, and thank you very much for your public service, especially during these challenging times. But there are a lot of mandates for public records or agency records that have to stay around for a long time. And whether they're sitting inside an agency or they've moved over to an institution like our Library Archives Canada, there's somebody with a mission there, and they've been preserving physical materials, and now they have to figure out how to preserve the born digital and the digitized. And it takes this combination of intent, of policies and protocols and strategies, and times when content gets transferred out of operational systems into systems that are purpose-built to keep it alive going forward. A use case that I didn't describe in the paper, but I can share with you, is a U.S. county government, and one of the units that wants to use the system is engineering and transportation. And the reason is, well, of course, a lot of stuff they create lives for a long time. They put up bridges and they build roads, and those files around those as-built have to stay around for a long time. But the problem too is that the objects that they deal with are complex, and so the records management application, the ECRM, the RMS, the one that's probably certified to DoD, isn't sufficient to take care of these complex objects. And so they want to be able to use that digital repository system more as a records management application, because they have long-term records. A lot of stuff they create from the beginning has a long life, but also because it's complex and it's metadata rich, and that's an environment that is a good fit to this kind of a system. Another example is planning documents. So this week, last week, we had a presentation by some archivists who are actively capturing and preserving COVID-19 response and recovery information. And one of the archivists that spoke works for Network Rail in the UK. So it's the rail system. And the rail system in the UK has switched from being a passenger system primarily to being primarily a freight system as they help deal with logistics under the COVID-19 situation. And this interesting story she told was how their planning group went from a normal 7-month cycle of creating a new schedule to a 10-week schedule. And what they want to do is wrap their arms around that whole set of emergency schedule planning content in a SharePoint site and save it. So the use cases and the users are growing slowly, and it's part of what I think the ARMA Canada community and records managers around the world can help to advance. So this is an exemplar. There's a companion ISO standard to the reference model, and it's 16363. And it's the audit and certification criteria, like ISO standards. You can be certified to ISO 9000 or 9001 or 2. This is the same sort of thing. A third-party set of auditors come in to look at your trusted digital repository to see, do you have funding? Do you have organizational commitment? Do you have resources, staff people? Are you doing everything that the reference model says for the digital objects and maintaining their authenticity and providing access? And so only 2 organizations in the world have been certified so far. One of them is the U.S. Government Publishing Office, so that's where official documentations from the courts and the legislature go to be stored permanently. And so you can read a little bit about this collection. They talk about packages coming from this and that part of the government. They're a permanent digital repository, and so they have gone to the highest level to prove that they have everything in place. And then just like every other ISO standard, they'll be recertified in a couple of years. So this is the exemplar of what a digital preservation repository looks like. So here's my call to action for the ARMA community. I think there are many ways in your normal job of consulting, advising, researching requirements, building and updating retention schedules, appraising content for long-term preservation, making decisions about file formats. I think all of these things place you extremely well to provide education and engagement, to ask people how long do these need to be kept, what is the format, what are we going to do, and go move into a more proactive way of handling digital content to the benefit of your organization. It will potentially save costs by moving things that don't need to stay in an operational system. It will maybe get some good discussions or arguments around retention schedules and how long do we really need to keep this stuff. So these are some of the things that I know that you're typically involved in, where I think we have a tremendous opportunity to raise awareness, engage our organizations, educate our coworkers and peers, and move some of the content that are sitting in operational systems that need long-term preservation into an environment that can actually support it. So this is Preservica. This is our mission statement. We came out of a project with the UK National Archives and have been on the track of helping organizations protect digital content. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. You can reach me at Preservica. I also have a self-assessment website you can check out here. And I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori, for that excellent presentation. And we're going to take a few audience questions now. So first question, how does updating record formats impact the authenticity and diplomatics of the original electronic file?
Sorry, now you can hear me. Thank you. Thanks for the question, but first I just wanted to thank the editorial board, especially Christy and Adrienne, who was the person who notified me that there was an opportunity to share something that I knew about digital preservation, and kudos to the program committee for pulling this together, so thank you very much. I can tell you that archivists and records managers have always been concerned about authenticity and integrity, so it's something that's factored into the best practices in this community, and it's something that, in our case, the technology helps to do. So the archival practice is to always keep the original object, and what happens in preservation is that the original is taken in, and then you have options if you want to create additional copies. So that original object is always protected. There are integrity checks, hash digests performed when something comes into the repository, and that gives a unique fingerprint that down to the bit level characterizes that file. And so if you run a hash digest and then periodically run it again, it continues to prove that the object is complete and has been unaltered. So it's a very standard practice to keep the original, to have a preservation master, and then to have other copies to protect against any kind of corruption to the file. So it's something factored into the practice of long-term preservation.
Great, thank you. So given the costs of updating formats and preserving long-term records, what cost-saving measures would you recommend?
Cost, that's always a problem, especially when you're talking about something that you're going to keep around for a really long time. So I have a couple of recommendations. I think the first thing is to right-size your information assets. I've probably read and reviewed hundreds of retention schedules in my career, and there are many things that are on there that are long-term that maybe need to be disputed, right? So if you can right-size your content, your records management, retention schedule, so we're not keeping things longer. That's one way to save costs. Don't save it if you don't need to. Another thing is to optimize the capabilities in the systems that you have. If you have an RMS, a content management system, and it has the capability to create a copy to render to PDFA, so optimize what you have. The next thing is take things out of operational systems and put them in a better environment, because that's potentially going to save you storage costs. It may save you software license fees. It might cut down on the backup and recovery time for applications that are being backed up. So there's a couple things you can do to get the mix of, does it sit in an operational system or does it move into a different environment? And there are some cost considerations there. And then I think the other thing is to use technology neutral file formats if you can, like PDFA or TIFF or JPEG. Move it to a format that's going to be able to be moved forward, and keep it and take it out of a proprietary format if you need to.
Great, thanks. That's great. Those are good tips. Okay, so archival standards for electronic records often refer to proprietary formats, like you mentioned, PDFA. What impacts does this have for small or nonprofit organizations, for example, costs or accessibility?
Yeah, I think there is no silver bullet for keeping long-term digital content. We basically have two options. We either have to migrate the content forward so that it can be rendered and read by machines, or we have to emulate the software environment where it was created and then save the emulation. So most organizations choose to migrate file formats. So archives and institutions around the world have set out preferred and supported file formats. And I think the best practice for a small institution is to try to follow those guidelines. So Library Archives Canada, the National Archives of the United States, the United Kingdom, universities, provincial and state archives will have a list of preferred and supported file formats for video, audio, GIS, documents. And I think small institutions should follow those guidelines, because you're hedging the bet that it's going to be possible to migrate those formats forward, even things like PDF, which it is owned by Adobe, but it's considered in that class of formats that will continue to be supported by a very, very large community.
Great. Well, thank you. And actually, we are out of time for questions. But again, Lori's contact information is on her slideshow in the EventMobi app. So please feel free to reach out to her. And thanks for your questions. I'm going to turn you back.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'm going to turn you back over to Barb, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about what's upcoming in Sagesse.
Great. Thanks, Bobbie. And thank you, Lori. I am on the same soapbox as you when I constantly am, asking for how are we going to use these documents in the future. We seem to, put them away and then tend to forget that we need to be able to use them in the future. So I think you can agree with me, those were two great presentations. To read the full articles, you need to go to ARMA Canada or armacanada.org/Sagesse. And while you're there, check out the full current edition and maybe look at the past editions. There's fantastic information to be found. Volume 5, the one that we just put out in Records Management Month in April, has, there was a university essay contest that was on the go. And we had two winning articles, Preserving the Legacy of Residential Schooling Through a Rawlsian Framework. It's also been translated into French. And also there was another article, the runner-up was Smart Wearables and Canadian Privacy, Consumer Concerns and Participation in the Ecosystem of the Internet of Things. And for some reason, I think I've skipped a slide, so I'm just gonna go back, and sorry about that. There were two white papers, the one that we just heard from Lori Ashley, Integrate Digital Preservation into Your Information Governance Program, as well as a case study, Migrating a billion-dollar government agency to a new record system. Both fantastic articles, well worth the read. Then we also had 5 articles in the journal. The first one was Achieving Perfect Pitch. Second is Our Phygital World and Information Management. And yes, we did spell that right, Phygital. You'll have to read the journal to figure out what that one is. And also the first presentation that we had today with a lot more information, the Transformational Impacts of Big Data and Analytics. That one has also been translated into French. There's also 2 tributes to ARMA members that have passed away in the last year that have made significant contributions to ARMA at the local and regional efforts. And the 2 are Leonora Casey and Ivan Saunders. We're currently looking for authors for our next publication of Sagesse, which is tentatively scheduled for publication in early January of 2021. We'd like to launch a special COVID-19 edition. We want to hear how this pandemic has changed the way you work, how your companies have coped with these changes maybe. Have you launched a new application or series of applications to meet the rising need for collaboration? How do you keep the proprietary information of your company secure when your employees are scattered all over the world? If you'd like to submit an article, a white paper, or want to know more about the University Essay Contest, please send us an email at sagesse@armacanada.org. We would love to hear from you. So to wrap up today's event, I'm going to pass the baton over to Christy Walters, the ARMA Canada Region Director. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you everyone for joining with us for today's live Sagesse webinar. As we had to cancel our in-person conference this year, ARMA Canada is working very hard to continue to provide educational offerings, support our chapters, and connect with you. The conference team is working as we speak on an ARMA Canada Connects webinar series coming to you through the summer and into the fall. More details coming soon. For all the chapter leaders out there, I'm happy to announce that ARMA Canada and ARMA International are joining forces along with the other regions to put together a joint all-region virtual leadership event that is taking place June 18th from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, more details on how to register for that coming to you soon. Our marketing team is also working very hard to keep us engaged and connected during this time through email, on our website, and on our socials. Check us out on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you'd like to sign up for our email list, contact us by visiting our website at armacanada.org. In other news, we'll be extending this year's ARMA Canada Awards nomination deadline to June 30th. If you know of anyone at all you'd like to nominate, please fill out the application and send it to Carol Garnham at taskforce@armacanada.org. Finally, in our last regional newsletter, we provided a link to chapter survey that we'd love for chapters to fill out to get an idea on how best ARMA Canada can serve you during this time. I think we may be out of time for questions right now, so if it's okay, I'm going to proceed to close the event. Thank you, Bobbie. Thank you, Yuta, Barbara, and the Sagesse committee, as well as my fellow presenters, Lori and Crystal, the marketing team, the conference team, for your work on this year's Sagesse publication and on this virtual event. I'm so proud of this year's edition. A quick reminder that we'd love to hear your feedback on this live webinar event, so please take some time to fill out the survey at the bottom of the screen by clicking on Session Feedback before leaving this webinar. Thank you all for joining us and for continuing to support ARMA Canada. I hope you and your families are staying safe and keeping well during this challenging time. And I hope to see you all again at our next virtual event. Take care, everyone.